I recently rewatched Blade Runner 2049, and I couldn't help but stop to think just how incredible it is that a movie like this got made. Of course, it came from existing property and had a established director behind it, but still, the existing property is in part known for being a movie that didn't do well upon its initial release financially and only found a bigger audience later, much how you could argue this film followed a very similar path. When I think about this film, there's so many things you could talk about that are just so incredible with it, right? I mean, for one thing, it's like the best looking movie I've ever seen in my life. I love the direction. I always think the editing in this is underrated, where they'll have these long takes, but then they'll have some quick cuts back and forth that really, I think, add juice to certain scenes. And of course, all the acting, even like, Harrison Ford, who sometimes in these movies, when they get somebody who is in an earlier version of the film, they kind of phone it in. That did not happen here. Everyone in this film is great. But what I find so fascinating about Blade Runner 2049 is, in today's day and age, it feels like this happens a lot, where there is a movie that was successful, and so because of that, you have a studio deciding to make a remake or a sequel or sort of a soft reboot in certain cases, and they're rarely good, right? I mean, I guess that's not fair. Some of them are good, but it feels like very few of them are truly great, and it feels like very few of them are even trying to be great. It often feels like there's a lot of fan service or a lot of trying to just reintroduce a new crowd to what worked. The Force Awakens having another Death Star kind of thing. Blade Runner 2049, while it does build on the existing material, feels very different. This is a slow movie. This is not one that is rushed or action heavy. In fact, there's no real action at all. There's a couple scenes, but not much. And it's a challenging film, specifically with the protagonist of Joe, who I just find to be one of the most interesting blockbuster protagonists we've ever seen, and certainly one of the most interesting blockbuster protagonists we've seen in recent memory. Early in the film, we see Joe go through this procedure where he is asked a bunch of questions, and then he has to answer them, and he has to kind of repeat after what the person or the robot is saying to him. And sort of the game of the procedure seems to be they want him to not feel things. He is supposed to not feel things and not react to things, and the less he feels, the better. The less emotion he has, the better. And this is really Joe's problem. This is his existential crisis that he goes through, and that a lot of us have gone through in our lives, which is he wants to be more than he is. He has a specific role in society, to be a robot that kills other robots. Don't feel, just react. He wants to be different, but how can he be different? And this film also shows this through how he interacts with sex. It wouldn't be fair to call him asexual. I mean, he literally has sex in the movie, but no matter what relationship he has with the many women he encounters, it never feels quite right, whether it's a prostitute or a device that allows him to have a quote-unquote significant other. There's always just something a little fake about it. In many ways, you could argue this is like a Pinocchio type story, where he just wants to be a real boy. And one comparison I can't help but think about is Steven Spielberg with his film Artificial Intelligence, which of course Stanley Kubrick came up with the original idea of. But what I find so interesting about the protagonist, Joe, in this case, is it doesn't seem like he actually cares that much about being real. He definitely wants to be real and is clearly heartbroken when it turns out he's not. But my interpretation was never that he actually cared about being real or not real. I think he just cares about what being real would mean. It would mean he's special. He has significance in this world instead of just being another robot who's designed to kill robots. And one of the more powerful scenes towards the end of this film, you see him interact with Harrison Ford's character Deckard, and Joe heavily implies that he has memories with Deckard, because obviously Deckard's daughter implanted the memories into Joe. This is yet another difficulty that Joe just has to deal with being who he is. Some of his memories that he would love to cherish, he can't because he knows they're not his. He can't hug his dad and say I've missed him because his dad doesn't even know who he is. He might as well not exist. And yet, Joe does not have a purely tragic life in this movie. He does find a way to have meaning in dying for a cause, in doing whatever he can to save Deckard and not allow horrible things to happen. Yes, Joe ultimately lost his life, but at least for a moment, he was able to find something real.